All right, we'll go ahead and get started now. Welcome to the Teaching English Abroad seminar/panel. We're really excited to have you today, and we have a great group of UC Davis alumni with us as well. So first, I'm going to do just a couple introductions for you all. We'll talk a little bit about some housekeeping items, and then I'll pass it over to our panelists. My name is Brianne Holden, and I'm the Global Learning Advising Coordinator at the UC Davis Global Learning Hub. I'm joined by my two wonderful co-hosts and colleagues. First, Jenny Moylan, who is working behind the scenes with me, and she is one of our Study Abroad program coordinators, and Janice C., who is one of our intercultural program coordinators as well. Janice will be filtering through the Q&A, so please do continue to feel free to post any questions as our time throughout the meeting. We're joined, luckily, by 4 amazing UC Davis alumni today who have either taught English abroad or even currently teaching abroad. First, we have Laura Kim, who is currently working in South Korea. We have Georgie Horton, who has taught English in France, Marissa Izagiri, who is currently in Japan, and Maura Lewis, who taught English in Spain. So in a moment, I'm going to turn it over to our first panelist. But before I do, I wanted to go over just a couple different housekeeping rules. First, as I'd mentioned, Janice is monitoring the chat. And when I say chat, really, I mean Q&A. So please do feel free to drop in any questions at any point. We're going to leave a good amount of time at the end of this session for Q&A, but we'll also pause in between panelists. So if there is a particular question that you have for anyone, do feel free to drop that in, and Janice will be filtering those my way. And let's see, also, I do want to let you know, you probably received when you dropped in, this webinar is being recorded. I want to reemphasize that this webinar is indeed being recorded, and that we are going to do that and then drop the recording into our Global Career Development Series website where you first registered. And so we'll follow up with that as well. And then a couple different pieces as well. So first, I wanted to make sure to launch a poll. We want to get a sense of who our attendees are today. So let's see. Let me launch this first poll. So this first poll is, what region of the world are you considering teaching English in? You can definitely feel free to select multiple answers. And so I'll give you all about a minute to go ahead and answer that. Okay, it looks like the answers are slowing down, and I'm going to stop in about 4 seconds. Okay, let's see. All right, well, we have quite a number of you are interested in going to Europe. We have a couple people representing Europe today. We have a good amount of you, 66% in Asia, 51% in Latin America, 19% in Middle East and North Africa. We have Oceania at 4% and Sub-Saharan Africa at 13%. That's great. I love to see so much interest in so many different places. That's wonderful. Okay, and then I'm also going to share another poll in just a moment. We want to get a sense of what your major is and what you're doing while you're at UC Davis. So let's see. All right, so please select your field of study. Great, I'll give you about 3 more seconds. All right. Okay, so let's see what we got. We have about 4% in ag and vet sciences, a good 15% in bio and health sciences, 11% in business and econs, 4% in environmental and resource science, 4% in ethnic and cultural studies, 9% in global and community development, and quite a number of you, 41% in humanities, languages, and literature, and 4% in the physical science, including math and engineering. Wonderful, awesome. All right, let me stop sharing this. Okay, so we're going to start with our first panelist. Our first panelist is Laura Kim. Laura graduated from UC Davis this past June as a double major in Spanish and linguistics. She was born in Seoul, South Korea, and moved to Mexico City when she was 4 years old. Laura was educated there until 10th grade and spent the last 2 years of high school at an international boarding school in New York doing an international baccalaureate program. Laura is currently working as an English teacher for Brainiac English Academy in South Korea, and her ultimate goal is to become a speech language pathologist. Laura, welcome, and thank you so much for being here today. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Well, hello everyone. My name is Laura, and as it was mentioned, I am working at this place called Brainiac English Academy as an English teacher, and it's a private institution for elementary students. And right there, I was just hired this past month, so I'm still learning things in there. Let's see. First of all, this is not my first English program. I worked in another place before, and when I first started there, I did not have any intentions in teaching at all. Like I didn't have any intention in pursuing a career in teaching, but I got an opportunity, and now, well, I enjoy teaching a lot. I enjoy working with kids, and the process of me finding the program was simpler than I thought. So there's a platform similar to LinkedIn, and in that platform I just put up my resume and my contact info, and there are two options. I can apply to places, to job positions, or people can contact me directly to my contact info. And in my case, I applied to like 5 or 6 places this time, and I went on an interview in which it was all the same. So in the interview, I go there, I talk to the supervisor, and they give you like a lot of materials to prepare a 10-minute class, like a sample class, and then I have to teach in front of the other teachers or in front of the supervisor, and then they decide whether they want to hire me or not. So some places said they wanted to work with me, some places that said that maybe next time. So I got hired in like 3 places, and I chose this place mainly because I like the working environment. Sorry, I'm going through the questions. And let's see. The financial package here, honestly, it's not like it has a lot of benefits. I have to be honest about that. So I am being paid about what is equal to $2,500 per month, but it doesn't include any other benefits. So the thing is that in Korea, there are health benefits by the government, like it's healthcare for everyone. So the company doesn't have to pay for me. Housing, I'm living with my family, so I don't have to worry about that. And the only thing I have to actually like worry is the transportation, but even that is not a big problem, because in Seoul, at least, the public transportation is very, very, very what do you call it, like, well, like you can go anywhere in Korea with public transportation in a very cheap price. So that's how I travel every morning. And the workplace, I currently work 8 hours a day, and my job includes planning for classes, of course, and communicating with the parents, which is something very essential in Korea, because they think not just communicate with the students, but having the parents know what they're learning about and our programs is essential. So we communicate with them at least once a month. And what else? We have like team meetings and everything that you can imagine. I guess it's a really, really busy workplace, and I barely have lunchtime, but it's interesting. And my English, so excuse me, my voice. What else? I grew, as mentioned, I grew up in Mexico, so I did not grow up with the Korean culture, and it is a little bit different from what I grew up with, of course. So the workplace culture is, how to explain this? So in Korea, we use, sorry, in the Korean language, there's something called honorifics. So if it's a person who is older or in a higher position, we talk to them in honorifics in a very respectful manner. And that is very, very important here, which is not as relaxed as I worked in previous places in America. Like it's more like a chill vibe, but here it's very, very strict. If you are disrespectful to someone, they make you even to write a report about like why I was disrespectful and stuff. So I guess that's the different part about me working here versus working in America. Respect is the number one thing and a number one rule to be following. So that's definitely changed me because I have to act in a different way when I'm in the workplace. But I think it's a good thing just in the sense that we all respect each other, just in a different manner. I have taught English before and I'm currently teaching English, but this is not my final, what do you call it? This is not my, sorry, I cannot think properly. I'm not planning on staying on the teaching career. I am planning on going to grad school like in 2 years and pursue a career in speech language pathology. But I think it's a good experience to be having this experience with children in general. And yeah, I don't know what else to mention, but yeah, I think that's all I have prepared for today.
Thanks, Laura. And then for all of our attendees, please do feel free to use the Q&A option at the very bottom. I think it should be probably bottom slightly right of the Zoom screen. And we'll ask that you please add your questions to the Q&A instead of the chat so that we can make sure that we get to each of your questions. Janice, are there any particular questions that we should pause for at the moment?
One of the attendees wanted to ask, Laura had mentioned that she found her job on a platform similar to LinkedIn. What was that platform called?
Oh, so that platform was called, okay, I can just type it here. So it's called Haramin, but then so another downside about this is that this website is entirely in Korean. So if someone is interested in teaching in Korean and like have more opportunities, they need to speak a little bit Korean in order to be able to apply to these places and everything. Oh, and I forgot to mention one thing. So I attended this global conference this past February in UC Davis. And there was this place called the EPIC. It stands for English Program in Korea. So it's the governmental program in Korea to teach. So it only hires people in a foreign country, including America. And I think it's a good opportunity to go to their website and learn more about it. Excuse me. Sorry, I have the link here. And I think it's worth sharing because they have, sorry. Okay, let me just put it in the chat too.
And I think that, so the chat's only available to those of us who are panelists, but still drop it in. And what we'll do at the end is that we'll share it out to everyone. So for anyone who's waiting for the chats, please know you'll get them at the end. And then also, Laura, I think you brought up a great piece also about the Global Learning Conference. So that happens through the UC Davis Global Learning Hub every year, and that started for the first time last year. And it's a great place to connect with other students, to connect with people who are in the field of international education, to connect with different types of English opportunities like EPIC, which, as Laura had pointed out, is a program where you can teach English in Korea. And we also have a lot of these resources on our website. So we'll be giving you more information about these resources at the end of this too. Thank you very much, Laura. So we're going to go on to our second panelist, Georgie Horton. Georgie graduated from UC Davis in the spring of 2019, and she received her degrees in both French and economics with a concentration in poverty and inequity. So after graduation, she left the US to be part of a teaching English or teaching assistant program in France called Tapif, where she worked in Normandy. Georgie is currently in the process of applying to graduate school with the intention of pursuing a master's degree. Welcome, Georgie, and thank you very much for being here with us. I'll turn it over to you.
Awesome. So like she said, my name's Georgie. I was living in Normandy, which is in the north central region of France. I was working as an assistant professor, which is essentially just an assistant teacher. And I learned about Tapif through UC Davis. Had something similar to this, and someone was giving a presentation, and which is where I got interested. And I was personally looking to move forward after graduation to be to work as a teacher. And so I was interested and I applied. The application process, in my personal experience, was very easy. You needed an essay, you needed a passport, and letters of recommendation. Professor Goldstein and Amy Lowry were incredibly helpful, and they really made the process easy. In regards to where you get placed, you have 3 choices, and you can pick any of the departments in France. So that includes Martinique, Guadeloupe, Réunion, which aren't in continental Europe. So that I think personally is cool. And you get to pick the city/town size you want to work in. So if you want to work in a small town versus if you want to work in somewhere that's really populated, you can do that. And then you also get to pick the student age range. So I chose to work with high schoolers because I felt more comfortable doing that, but you can also work with elementary school students. In regards to money, before leaving, they recommend that you have about $2,000 in the bank for flights because they don't compensate flight prices. And if you have a passport, that's really a finance that you don't need to spend then. Once you get there, you have an income of 750 euros a month, which is equivalent to like 800 American dollars. I don't know. I'm sorry. There's no airfare reimbursement, which is unfortunate. There is free healthcare, as it is France. And the transport can be subsidized through the program Tapif, which is really nice. I didn't use it because I ended up walking everywhere. So it leads to living pretty comfortably, in my personal opinion. My rent was about 350 euros a month, which is again like $400. And everything's really close. And because of public transport, a lot of things are easily accessible, like schools, malls, etc. So for the job itself, you work 12 hours a week, which really is not a lot. Most of the people I talk to wish they'd worked more. Every 6 weeks, you get a 2-week vacation, which is super nice, but it's actually really similar to the American school system. We just don't localize it like that. So I didn't really have to do anything outside of work to do it. I made a PowerPoint the first week, and I probably used it every single week introducing myself to a new group of students. So that really came in helpful. Challenges overall were few and far between. I don't know the expression, but there's a language barrier for some people because you only need 2 semesters of French to apply. And with that, some people speak really well, some people don't speak really well, but a lot of my experience, I joined a soccer team when I was there, and even if they couldn't speak English very well, they tried and they would have fun with it. And so that was really, a positive experience. And overall, I would suggest joining the program Tapif if you can. I learned a lot, and I got to travel, which I really wanted to do. And it was cool because you don't have to have a degree in French to join. You don't have to want to pursue being a teacher. You can just join because, you want to go stay in France, which I liked. And then cultural differences were not terrible. Some new things I saw in school where students can't sit down until they're told. They can't come in the classroom until they're told. You can't wear beanies. I got dress coded by one of the teachers. He thought I was an 8th grader, apparently. So that was fun. The grocery stores have lockers, which I really liked. My main critique of French culture is la bise, which is where you go and you kiss people on the cheek when you see them. I didn't grow up doing that, so it was hard for me to all of a sudden have these strangers come up and kissing me on the cheek. I'm like, whoa, who are you? But, if you grow up doing it, it's fine. Obviously, they survive, but it was different for me as an American abroad. And other things that kind of caught me off guard were the students would ask a lot of questions in regards to just being an American. So one student asked, does everybody have a white fence outside their house? Which I was confused by. So I'm like, no, I don't have a white fence, but it's a lot of the stuff they learned about the United States, they learned through film and television. And so when I was there, the students loved Riverdale. So they would ask me questions about Riverdale, but I don't watch Riverdale. So I'm like, yeah, okay, and I was kind of, move on to other things. But all the students were really nice. Obviously, you have some bad eggs in every group, but for the most part, they were really interested in meeting me, which I enjoyed, and they were interested in learning English. And then now, I guess I would like to pursue a graduate degree, and I'd like to work as a study abroad advisor. So that's it.
That's great. Thank you, Georgie. And Janice, are there any questions for Georgie that we should answer at this time? And you're on mute, just so you know.
Sorry. Let's see, Katie actually just had a question. How much French did you have to speak?
Okay, so for the application, you have to write your essay in French, and your essay is talking about why you want to go work with Tapif. So if you have enough French to be able to do that, that's pretty much all you need. It doesn't have to be super detailed. It can just be, I want to go to Tapif because, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's just 2 semesters of French, though.
Okay.
Great. I think we'll jump. I know we're a couple minutes behind, so let's wait for additional questions towards the end, and let's go on to our third panelist. So our third panelist is Marissa Izagari, and Marissa graduated from UC Davis in 2018. After studying Japanese and interacting with international student community, Marissa became passionate about language and cultural exchange. And through the Japan Exchange and Teaching Program, also known as JET, very commonly, she became an English teacher at a small elementary school and junior high in rural Akita, Japan. As an assistant language teacher, she hopes to give her students confidence in themselves and in their abilities to communicate with people around the world. And Marissa, I also understand that you're still there in Japan teaching English, and so welcome, and we're looking forward to hearing about your experiences right now.
Hello. As she said, I'm teaching in Akita Prefecture, Japan. I actually never wanted to be an English teacher. I was an English major, and often people would ask me if I wanted to become a teacher, and the answer was always no. But then I started to volunteer at the International Center at Conversation Hour, and I became really passionate about helping people become confident in themselves and in their ability to communicate with people from around the world. Because I think that when you get to know other people from around the world, you also get to know yourself a little more. So I thought I enjoyed it so much, why not try to continue that cultural exchange? So I applied to the JET program, and that process takes about a year. So I applied, I believe, in October of 2018, and then I waited a couple months, and then I got an interview, and I did my interview, and then I waited a couple months, and then I got accepted, and then I waited a couple months, and then I got my placement. And what's notable about the JET program is that they let you request places you might want to live in, but they're going to kind of put you wherever they want you to go, wherever they need you. So I requested like Kyoto, Kansai area, but I was placed in northern Japan in Akita, which is very different. It was kind of a shock for me a little because I've never lived in the snow. I had to learn how to drive in the snow for the first time. And there's also not too many things to do here that involve my interests. So I had to kind of learn a new way of living while I was here. I saved about $2,000 before I came here, and that was a good amount for my area. People who do move to other areas like cities have to save way more because they have to deposit for like apartments. And when I moved to my place, actually, I had a bare apartment, so I had to buy everything and start completely from scratch. And that was kind of difficult, but I had a great community in my area. And the other ALTs, assistant language teachers, helped me kind of get used to my area and what was good. And I also had very supportive superiors who helped me kind of get to know my coworkers. And so I feel like the transition was actually very easy. I work at an elementary school and a junior high, and the things I do there are a little different. So at my elementary school, the teachers don't speak English. So even though it's not a requirement for you to speak Japanese through this program, it's kind of helped me a very great amount. My teachers often discuss lesson plans with me in Japanese, and they're learning English alongside with the students many times. And they also have the pressure of teaching it with me at the same time. I work with about 5 teachers, even though my schools are small because you have 1 teacher for each grade. And then at my junior high school, I do things like English boards, speech contests, helping with lesson planning, lesson prepping. But that teacher, she speaks pretty good English, so I almost never have to use English in the office at the junior high school. So it's kind of different. Also, I would say like my biggest challenge as being a teacher is that technically I'm not a teacher, I'm an assistant language teacher. So I need to coordinate with someone else and to plan things with someone else and also respect their wishes, but try to put a native speaker's point of view at the same time. And sometimes those things clash, like with what the textbook says versus what we usually say, or questions about like how we write things or how certain words should be said based on accents. But it's really this job, I would say, if you're going to do something like this, it's all about adaptability and going with the flow and learning to communicate with other people and have those discussions about how things can go smoothly. You have to be able to improvise. Sorry, my English is so bad right now. You have to be able to improvise on those things. And so I would say, all in all, I'm having a great time. I'm learning a lot about myself. It is technically like my first real job in an office, so that's also been difficult. But I would say that all in all, it's been a pretty good experience. And I'm hoping after this, I can take my experience and continue to work with students who are studying abroad in California.
Great, thanks so much, Marissa. Janice, are there any questions that we should pause for momentarily?
I think one question that could be answered really quickly is just like, what is the population of Akita? And then the second question for Marissa, specifically about JET, was asking what the interview process was like.
I do not know the population of Akita. I would say it's an aging population though. So many people are moving out of the prefecture. So it is a lot smaller. But it's very rural. It's not like a city, it's not heavily populated, but I don't know the number. I'm sorry. And then the interview process, I would say there were many people there. I've heard it's pretty competitive. When I went, they asked me questions, and then I had a mock lesson, which I was very afraid for because I never taught before. But I think it went pretty smoothly because I guess like I'm here, but I'd say if anything, what they're looking for is flexibility. So even though I made mistakes during my mock lesson, I was able to get back on my feet. So if you're thinking about the interview or things like that, just keep trying, I would say.
Great, thank you so much. And folks, please do feel free to continue to post questions. We will make sure to leave time, so if your question hasn't been answered to this point, just know we'll still have time. We have one last panelist of today, and that is Maura Lewis. And Maura graduated from UC Davis in 2010 with a bachelor's degree in international relations and a joint study in Spanish. So after graduation, she spent 2 years teaching English in Spain in both the Basque Country and in Madrid. And since returning to the US, she's worked as an elementary school teacher, and she received her master's degree in communication disorders from the University of Texas at Austin. She now lives in San Diego and works as a speech language pathologist in an elementary school. So welcome, Maura, and please take it away.
Great, thank you. So as Brian mentioned, my name is Maura, and I taught English abroad in Spain. I did a program called Auxiliares de Conversación, and I did it from 2010 to 2012. So I know it's not the most recent experience, but I know that the program hasn't changed very much in the last 8 years or so. So the main reason that I wanted to teach English abroad is, first of all, I didn't really know what I wanted to do as I was getting ready to graduate from undergrad. And I had a friend who was applying to this program, and I'd always wanted to teach abroad. I really wanted to fine-tune my Spanish skills. That was the main reason. I had studied abroad in Spain, and I had majored in Spanish. So I felt pretty confident with my skills, but I just wanted to take it to the next level and feel more proficient with my Spanish skills. So the program itself sounds almost identical to the program in France that Georgie was talking about. It's through the Spanish government, and you're placed in schools as an assistant English teacher. So I wasn't meant to be the main teacher of the classroom. I was there to help support the English teachers in the schools that I was at. And the program provides a monthly stipend and health insurance, but that's about it. No real perks besides that, and there's pretty little guidance from the program themselves. So it's not like you arrive and they're like, here, we'll give you a place to stay while you're looking for an apartment. You just kind of are given an email with the name of your school and an address, show up on the first day, find an apartment before then. And so everything from finding an apartment to opening a bank account and applying to residency, that was all up to me. But I will say there's a lot of really active Facebook groups for the program. So that was really helpful for me. I got a lot of my questions answered just by asking in those Facebook groups, and that's kind of how I found the support for the program. So the application process, I didn't really know what I was doing as I was applying. It was on a first come, first served basis, which I didn't quite realize. So they weren't really looking for the most qualified candidates. They were just looking for applicants that satisfied all the requirements and giving them placements as they applied. So I applied right before the deadline since I didn't really know how it worked. And I think that was in April or so of that year. And so once they had my documents and they started accepting people, I got put on a wait list for many months. So it wasn't until July of that year that they sent me an email saying that I was accepted into the program, and they told me what region I was going to be in. And then shortly after, they told me the names of my schools that I was at. And we did get a say in what region we wanted to be in. So we got to pick 3 choices, so similar to the French program. So my first year, I got placed in the Basque Country, which is in northern Spain, and it's just incredibly gorgeous. That was actually my 3rd choice, but I'm really glad I got placed there, even though it wasn't my first choice, because I ended up loving it. And I got placed in 2 different schools. I was at a middle school and a technical trade school. And they were 2 different schools in 2 different small towns. So I decided to live in the city. The closest city was San Sebastian, and it was 30 minutes to one town, 45 minutes to the other. and I took the bus, or some days I got to carpool with other teachers that worked at the schools. So that worked out all right. And I liked living in San Sebastian, but still getting kind of to experience the small town experience being at the schools. And I was only working 12 hours a week, and I got a stipend of 700 euros per month, which was manageable, especially because I had so much free time. I was able to teach private English classes on the side. I just posted an ad online, and people contacted me wanting private English classes. So the days that I had off, I was able to just have back-to-back private English classes all day, which worked out pretty well. It was a nice way to supplement that stipend and have a little extra money coming in. And then I stayed for a second year, but I went to a different region. I went to Madrid for my second year. And that year I worked at a bilingual elementary school. And the program's slightly different in Madrid because you're expected to work 16 hours a week instead of 12, so a few more hours. And the stipend is a little higher. It's 1,000 euros per month. So I think I was working 2 full days and 2 half days. So I still had time to teach private lessons on the side and get a little bit more money coming in, which was nice. And so I've now been back in the US for 8 years, so I can kind of speak to how this, my experience teaching English shaped me career-wise. So when I first got back to the US, based on the experience I had teaching abroad, I was able to get a full-time teaching job at a private school without having any credential or full-time teaching experience. So it was kind of awesome that helped me get my foot in the door of becoming a teacher for a while. And so I was a teacher for 5 years, and now I work as a speech language pathologist. And I will say that I speak Spanish for as part of my job every day. And so I'm doing speech therapy in Spanish. I'm contacting parents and speaking Spanish. And so I'm really grateful that I did decide to continue developing my Spanish skills and become more proficient, because it's such an important part of my job. And I think there's a lot of jobs out there where it can really help you. And so I'm always recommending that people do programs teaching English abroad, because not only can it be really fun, but you can develop language skills that are really important, and also it can look good on a resume. So yeah.
Awesome, thanks for sharing. And so at this point, that was our 4th panelist, but I do want to pause still and see, Janice, if there's any questions specific to Maura before we open it up to the wider audience. Is there anything in particular regarding her experience in Spain?
Yeah, so one attendee wanted to ask, what city or region did Maura originally study abroad in? And then the second question was, how did she feel her Spanish, and did her fluency improve while she was there?
Yeah, so I studied abroad in Madrid. So originally Madrid had been my first choice to go back to when I applied the first time around. So that's kind of why I wanted to go back to Madrid for my second year. And in terms of Spanish, yeah, I think it did improve, but I also made an effort, because I feel like depending on what region of Spain you're in, I think it can be easy to not practice your Spanish, especially if you're in a big city like Madrid where there are tons of Americans doing this program. If you end up living with Americans and you're speaking English at work and your social circle is Americans, you might not end up improving that much. So I made an effort to, I did my best to make Spanish friends. I lived with Spaniards to make sure that I was speaking it at home. So yeah, I think if you want it, you can get a lot of opportunities to improve it.
Awesome, thank you. So we're going to take just a moment, Janice, while you gather questions from folks. And if you have any questions for those of you who are attending, please feel free to keep dropping them in. I'm going to momentarily share my slide. And let's see. Oh, here we go. All right, so while Janice is getting our questions going, I did want to briefly just show you a couple upcoming events. I believe you can see my screen. Can panelists give me a thumbs up if you can see my screen right now? Thank you. Okay, so first of all, we have a couple new events coming up that are related to what you're participating in right now. The first one is our Global Career Development Series, which is what we're in right now. Coming up is an undergraduate research opportunities in Germany, and that will be on Monday, this coming Monday, the 12th. We're also going to have another one on, it's blocked, on creating a career vision workshop, and that will be this Tuesday, October 13th from 2 to 4. And then lastly, we have a career development series focused on building your professional brand through LinkedIn. Very important in our career world these days. And that will be held on Tuesday, October 20th from 4 to 5 p.m. The last piece that I want to make sure to show you, for any of you who are interested in getting more perspectives on global learning opportunities, either while you're in Davis or after Davis, including funding opportunities, including a plethora of things, I highly encourage you to check out our Global Learning Showcase that's coming up October 26th through the 29th. So it's basically a full week, a full 4 days. Each day will have a different theme. So Monday will be understanding global learning identities and skills and leadership. Tuesday, you'll have a focus on global internships, research, community engagement. Wednesday will be focused on study abroad programs. And then Thursday will be focused on UC EAP, so all UC campuses, open house. And these offer a ton of different series or different sessions. Some of them will be focused on a lot on funding, a lot on learning about the different types of in-person programs, virtual programs, programs that you can do freshman through senior year if you're a transfer student, if you're first gen, if any interest that you might have that relate to you. So I highly recommend that you check that out. And then at this point, we're really at questions. So I will stop sharing, and Janice, I'll turn it over to you to ask some questions for our panelists.
Yeah, so I grouped a lot of the questions like together since I did see a lot of general similarities between them. So one question that came up a lot, and I think any of the panelists can answer, or it could be each panelist can answer if we have the time. A lot of students asked about whether prior language knowledge or like a certain level of fluency was required or preferred for the programs. And in the same vein, did some programs prefer people with teaching experience?
So for the program that I did, I think we had to just kind of check a box that we had intermediate Spanish skills. So most people I knew at least had taken some Spanish classes, but occasionally I would meet someone who didn't have any background in Spanish, and I think maybe had just, or maybe just had very minimal background in Spanish. So it was mostly just on the honor system about that. And then in terms of teaching experience, they didn't ask for any teaching experience for the program I did.
And for me, when I was in France for Tapif, there were people I met who really didn't speak any French, and they knew, but most of the teachers, the English teachers, all spoke English. And so when I was working with them, they would speak to me in English, and they told me, pretend you don't speak French in front of the students, because they really want the students to learn English. So it's more about you being able to proficiently speak English as opposed to proficiently speak French. But obviously you have to be able to speak some French, because you have to go to the grocery store every once in a while to get your necessities. So
for the JET program, they don't require you to speak Japanese. During the interview, they do have a Japanese section if you've studied Japanese before, and those are like bonus points. Just kind of, oh, if you speak, oh, that's nice. But there's no pressure to speak any Japanese. But I would recommend speaking some, or at least trying to learn some, because you don't know where you're going to get placed. And I think it's probably a lot harder when you have teachers who don't know how to speak English well enough to communicate the lesson plans. And teaching prior, I think, are also kind of like bonuses, but there are no requirements for teaching prior. So other than like language exchange partner type situations, I'd never actually taught before going on the program.
For the institution that I am currently in, they speak full Korean, so they expect you to be able to speak fluently. But I know there are a lot of programs that they don't require you to speak any Korean, so that really depends. And as of experience, they required the specific place. Obviously, Brainiac required the applicants to have at least 1 year of experience. But in the previous place that I was in, they didn't require any experiences, and I went through a month of training. So it just really depends on where you're applying.
Great, thank you. Let's see, just had a recent question. When applying to a program that requires a foreign language, does the language have to be learned while in college, or could it be self-taught?
So for, again, the Tapif program, it has to be 2 semesters at the university level. So I don't know if you can do it I assume you can do it at a community college, but it has to be able to transfer over. I think I did it all my French at Davis, so I'm not confident in that.
For Korea, I think it's mostly just as long as you speak fluent Korean so that you can communicate with your supervisors and maybe like with the parents, it's enough. So it can be self-taught. They didn't have any specific like courses or requirements in terms of the language.
Okay.
When I did the program in in Spain, it was just checking a box, so it could have been either way, but I don't want to say that that's the way it still is because it has been a while. So I would double check on that one if you were interested in applying.
Okay, I have a question specifically for Moira, because you had mentioned private English lessons. They wanted to know if it was just like a simple, like just having conversations, or did you actually have to prepare like lessons to teach?
I was really open to anyone who contacted me. And so I had people who just wanted to have a conversation. I had some clients where we would just walk around the city for an hour just talking because they just wanted to improve their conversational English. And then I had other ones that were like, I want to learn business English. And I tried my best to kind of meet their needs. And I also had some like elementary school students or high school students where I was just helping them with what they were already working on at school.
Okay, let's see. I have a few questions for Marissa specifically, asking about your JET essay and the cost of living in like rural Japan in your area, and if you had an experience with like healthcare benefits there.
Okay. Oh, okay. So the essay that I wrote, I just wrote kind of my experience about learning that I wanted to become part of language exchange and learning about that experience. I think that came fairly easy to me because I enjoy writing. But as long as it shows your desire, I think, why you might be interested in it, I think it's anything you write, as long as it's personal, would be fine. And then,
sorry, it was like a lot. Cost of living in your area, and then experience with healthcare benefits there.
So the cost of living, it's pretty good. My rent is about $300 a month, but I also have to lease a car here because I have to drive everywhere and I don't get help on gas. because that's not allowed in my contract. So I do spend a decent amount on like living here and getting to work, but it's so much less than I would be spending in California. Maybe about 1,000 to $1,500 I spend on like expenses for things. But I'm still able to comfortably send money home for loans and stuff like that. And then for healthcare, I've actually had a good amount of experience with the benefits. Getting expensive work done and it only costing about $100 was great. So the benefits here are pretty darn good because you do get the insurance as a government employee kind of situation. So health insurance is good here. It's cheap, it's affordable, it's accessible.
Okay, great. Let's see. A question I've seen pop up a lot was about getting like a TEFL or a TOEFL certificate, so a teaching English certificate. And I think this can apply to any of the panelists, like whether that is a preference when applying or like or if certain programs prefer that.
I personally did not have any TOEFL certificate, but I did see a lot of job postings that wanted the applicants to have the TOEFL. Is definitely a plus because it definitely like shows them that you know English and like it proves your English level. So that or something called a TESOL. I don't know if like anyone knows it. It's like the teacher's certificate. I don't know much about it, but they ask for both of them if you have them, and it's definitely a plus.
So I think with Tapif, it's mainly targeting like students, and so they don't really require any like extra teaching ability like that. So
Same with the program in Spain.
Okay, and I think a lot of people also ask like whether their major would affect how like program preference, like whether they would get accepted or not. Do you have to be an English major or education major? Are those preferred?
For the JET program, you can have any major. Just apply, you'll be fine. Having some experience, probably with cultural exchange, is very important, I would say. But any major, go for it.
Same with the program in Spain. They just ask for a bachelor's degree. It can be in anything.
so for Tapif, you don't need to be studying French. You just have to be 21. You don't have to be finished with school yet. So that's neat in my personal opinion. So.
For Korea, it's also just a bachelor's degree, or there are a lot of programs that don't require you to have a bachelor's degree yet, have not graduated, and apply to those places and still become a teacher.
Okay, I think we'll have time for like 2 more questions. So one asked, would panelists recommend teaching in private or public schools?
I just want to say that with the JET program, you don't get to choose private or public. So I don't know about which one's better, but you don't get to choose.
For like in the case of Korea in general, there are 2 options. So the private institution that I'm in is like an after school kind of institution. So in those places, of course, you can choose that or you can choose a school, but it's definitely different because their curriculum is totally different, where what is taught at schools is mostly like memorization and like strategies on how to solve questions. And in institutions like I am in, you actually teach English, like grammar, reading, writing, etc. in more details.
Okay, and last question, which I think is pretty relevant for current times. Attendee asks, like, are programs still running, or are they paused because of pandemic?
So with the JET program, JETs who had been accepted were given the option to defer to next year or to stay on. And so some of those JETs deferred for the next year. So it is possible that the following year might be a little bit more competitive since some people are already accepted, but they are still accepting applicants this year. So it's still open.
And for Tapif, they're still accepting students who are still coming in to teach. I know they had a quarantine for 2 weeks, but because I didn't apply this past year, I'm not super confident exactly what the differences are, but I know schools in France are back open, so I assume that it's just kind of going on as it was.
The private institutions here, they never really closed down ever. I just heard that they did classes online through Zoom, and they have technology for that. So they have like a electronic board that you can share the screen with. So I'm currently working that way. There are some students that are online, some students on site. So I do both. With the students in front of me, I teach them on the electronic board while the students at home can also see what I'm doing. So I guess that's a big change for this private institution too. With this whole pandemic, they just try to make changes to adjust to the COVID situation.
Right, I think that's all the time that we have for questions. So I'm going to turn this back over to Bree.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much. So first, huge thank you to all of our panelists and sharing your insights. We really appreciate having you today. And it's great that you're all UC Davis alumni. I think that is it's wonderful that we're able to connect with you as alumni. For all of you attendees, let's grab one more poll that I'm going to launch right now. And we're just curious, what are you thinking about doing after your teaching abroad experience? And I want to also preface this with that there would be, I'm sure, a lot of people who would still be undecided. I know Maura, you had mentioned early on too, that before teaching English, you really didn't know what you wanted to do. And so there's no expectation around that, but we just want to get a sense of who our students are today with us. And I'll leave that up for just another 10 seconds or so. All right, and just to share with you all, let's see. So it looks like we have a good amount who are interested in kind of across the board, applying for jobs in the US, continuing to live and work abroad, applying for graduate school, and then a bunch that are also undecided, completely understandable, or an alternative option not listed. So at this point, we are at the 5 o'clock hour, and I want to thank everyone who is here today. Thank you panelists again, and thank you attendees for joining us. Please know that we have a number of ways that we can support you as you're at the Global Learning Hub, as you're thinking about post-graduation opportunities, especially if you're taking a look at teaching English abroad, if you're interested in Peace Corps, Fulbright, woofing, whatever it is, we have resources for you. So please do come in, reach out to us. We have at the moment virtual drop-ins Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, and you can find more information about that at our website, which I'm going to drop right now. Sorry, I'm dropping our email really quick right here. So that's our email in case you have any additional questions and you'd like to reach out to us. I'll go ahead and end there and say, please do feel free to follow up if anyone has any questions, and we'll be sure to send a follow-up email with more information and more resources as well. So I hope you have a wonderful weekend, and thank you again for coming today to be with us. And that's it. Have a great night.